As you saw, everything came up pretty well packaged in a nice small box. Yes, everything came wrapped individually in bubble wrap, and then it's in another plastic bag sealed. So yeah, it's really good packaging. I bought the 10-litre kit. I must admit, you want to really read into the kits and what you get. They come in, I think, 4-litre size, 10, 20, even bigger. And obviously you're just getting more chemicals, and it gets to a point where you get a larger power supply as recommended. So what size do you need? Well, really, it's how big a object you're going to get in the bath. So for me, the biggest item, I think, would be something like this. So physically needs to be fully submerged. Possibly you could get away with a 4-litre kit, but the other thing is also you want to do lots of things at the same time, like lots of bolts, also length. You have to think about length, that's the good point. So axle bolts, you know, that needs to fit in a 10-litre bath. It could possibly fit in a 4-litre bath. Anyway, the price difference isn't that much more between the 4 and 10-litre. So that's everything we've got. Oh, the other thing is also, like I say, yeah, really read into it, because my understanding of plating is not great. I've only sort of just read a few web pages, watched a few YouTube videos, and you can get different types of base plating. I think there's nickel, copper and zinc, and I think zinc is the one you want to get if you want to colorize your color your plating. So in our case, we want to do this classic green, olive drab green. I think you can only do that with the zinc mix, and with the kit they come with by default I think it's called the passivating step. So when you passivate, you plate first with zinc, and then you can get the color you want from gold, which is that yellowy finish, or blue dip. I think it just means an extra shiny sort of blue hue. It's not like solid blue, it's just a very light tinge. So you get that in the standard kit, but I want the olive drab, so I had to pay extra and get the olive drab mix. And the thing with these is you don't use all of it, obviously. It's for every 1 litre you use 75 mils, so maybe I'll make up a batch of whatever I can get this into, containers worth of you know, that might fit in a, I don't know, 6-litre container possibly. So I'd mix up 6 litres of this, so you don't use all of it at once. Apparently it lasts, once you mix it up, it doesn't go off. You can just keep it in a sealed container. All this doesn't go off. The only thing you might need to do is apparently take the anodes out every night you're finished and give them a polish. I think that's about it. Everything else you can just keep sealed up, ready to go. So the downside to having all this equipment for plating is it takes up a lot of bench space, and if you pack it all away, it's like everything, you're not going to use it. So you want it set up so it's ready to go, so when you've got a couple of washes or whatever, you can quickly plate it and not clutter up your bench. So what I've done is I've built 2 wooden big heavy duty drawers, and obviously put everything in buckets, so everything is sort of good to go, and I can run the plating in situ and not, like I say, clutter up the bench. So we've got a power supply, rust and scale removers, cleaners, the plating bath, and over here is all the passivator colours. So it's a process that sort of goes that way. So cleaning, plate, wash, acid, and then passivate, and then I just hang everything up to dry on a copper wire. And then obviously I've got heaters, the plating and the olive drab. I've got little aquarium or lizard heating blankets, I think they call them, off eBay. So they're a very thin heating element that sits at the bottom. It's very warm. It's only like body temperature type heat, but it's enough to get it up to 25 degrees or more. You know, I can even get it up to 30 degrees if I wanted to. So that keeps it all. Plus it's slightly insulated. And then when I finish, I can just, you know, close everything up and push it away, and it's good for the, you know, the next time I want to use it. So the process is simple. Step one is put your parts in an acid pickle mix, which is really just 1 part acid, pool acid will do, and 2 parts water, so it's quite strong. And another tip is leave this bath outside your garage, because you don't want it inside. The vapors can just start corroding any piece of steel. It's quite aggressive, so you only need to leave this in here for about 5 minutes just to knock off any rust and also remove any plating that might still be on there. You can see it's fizzing away. It gives off a bit of a gas, so it needs to be outside where it's well ventilated. Don't be tempted to leave it in there too long, because you'll start eating away the steel and the finish will be completely ruined. Next, just a final buff up on the wire wheel, and if it's a really shiny piece of steel, I give it a bit of a buff just so you get it as shiny as you can and gets rid of any grit or anything that's left over. So from now on in, we're wearing plastic gloves because you don't want to be touching it with greasy fingers. So this is just a final rinse to make sure there's no grease or anything left. And then one final rinse. And you're trying to just see there's no beading. The water should sort of like lay flat. So you know, when you put water on a greasy thing, it repels the water. So you want to make sure there's the whole thing is completely wet. There's no, like I say, beading effect. It's difficult to see on camera, but that's completely wet in a way. So that's ready to go in, and we just simply hang it up, drop it in the bath. We've got the little pump going, so it's slowly circulating the plating bath. And then we'll just finish off the other 3. Now we just turn the power on. And we just want a slight fizzing. There is a calculation you can do to work out the surface area and the current that you should be running at. But what I found is that I've sort of, as long as it's not too fizzy and it's fizzing enough, and all of them are fizzing. I don't know if you can see that. I'll zoom in. Yeah, so you can see that one there's fizzing away gently. There's, you know, fine amount of bubbles. There's not, you don't want big bubbles coming off, because that will cause a defect in the plating finish. So you want it just fizzing really, and you want to make sure all your parts are fizzing. So make sure you know your contact at the top here is nice and clean. There's no corrosion or something that's causing it to not cause a circuit. Now what we do is we wait 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes I rotate the part in the bath just so it gets a good even plating all the way around. Yeah, so we'll come back in 50 minutes. So that's 50 minutes now, so we'll just turn off the power supply and we can have a quick look at our first one. And yes, it's very shiny, if it focuses. It's almost like I say, a chrome finish. Obviously this is rough steel, so it's not exactly silky smooth, but it's good enough for these test parts. Yeah, so hopefully you can see the finish. It's very good. So what we'll do is we'll now passivate some, so we can leave one like this as plain, and that's finished. If you want, you could put a lacquer on it, but it's good enough to go straight onto the motorbike now if it was an axle bolt or something like that. But what we'll do is I'll also show you the passivation and what the colours look like. So we've got the first step is just to dip it in a mild acid to give it a bit of an etch. We've got a bit of just a plain tub of water. It's a bit yellow because you'll see in a minute the olive drab is washes off into it, so it gives it a slight discolouring. We've got the blue, we've got the gold, and we've got the famous drab. This one is Aqualac. That's for if you don't want it too shiny. I think it removes the iridescence, so it gets rid of any sort of that super rainbow color that you can get. I've played around with it. I don't see the need to get it myself, but yeah, I can't really tell the difference. So this is number 2. That's really come out well. Given that this was looked like this, so that was like that. It's basically the same piece of steel. And it's almost like you could see your face in it. Quite amazing, isn't it? So preparation is like spray painting. The more preparation and the smoother the finish, the better the overall look. So that's quite amazing, isn't it? Almost like a mirror finish. So with this one, we'll give it that gold finish, because some bolts now, especially Japanese bolts, they sort of have this yellow hue. So all you do is you pop it in this very mild solution of acid for 30 seconds. And I think what it's doing is, you can't see any fizzing, that's just air bubbles. It gives it, etches the surface of the metal very slightly, just enough to allow the passivating solution to sort of grip into the metal. So not long, 30 seconds, and just take it out, give it a quick rinse, because you don't want to transfer any acid. So it doesn't look any different really, but there's probably micro porosity in it now, and we just drop it in the gold for 30 seconds, give it a bit of a shake, and now it's got that sort of yellowy patina. Or just give it a quick rinse. This, you don't want to soak it too long, just enough to get the surface off. And there you have it, that sort of yellowy gold finish. You can play around with how long you leave it in the passivator to make it a lighter yellow. If you want, you just leave it in for 5 seconds. If you want a dark yellow or gold, obviously leave it in for 30 seconds. So there's a little bit of experimentation there to get the exact color you want. And now all you do is hang it up to dry for a few days. So, and we repeat. So we'll do the blue on this one, and then we'll stick it in the blue. Again, 30 seconds. And quick rinse. And like I say, you can't tell too much of a difference. If you catch it in the light, it sort of has a sort of a blue hue to it. It's quite subtle. It's sort of like a darker chrome now. So we'll make this one olive drab. Again, we just rinsed it off. put it in the acid 30 seconds, rinse, and then into the olive drab. Olive drab is a bit longer. That's anywhere between 30 to a minute and a half. So we'll leave this for a minute and a half. Give it a good coating. So that's the olive drab, and we'll just give it a quick rinse. So that's the heavy coating. What I might do is just as an experiment, we'll use the Aqualac to see what the finish is like. So a little bit of a rinse, shake off the excess, and then dips in the Aqualac. Now the Aqualac is has some sort of water soluble lacquer in mixed into it. Again, 30 seconds. Hang it up to dry. So there are our test pieces. We've got the olive drab on the end there, the plain chrome finish, I suppose you call it. We've got the blue one on the end, and then the gold, difficult to see, the gold one on the end there. The difference between the blue and the silver is very subtle. It's difficult to see on the camera. Maybe I could have left the blue one in a lot longer to sort of highlight the difference. But to be honest, I'm probably only going to be using the drab and the plain chrome finish. These are just some test bolts and bits and bobs I've already started to do for the motorbike. And that's it. So like I say, the chrome you could probably use almost straight away, but the other ones you would leave for a couple of days just to dry out. So I've got the steering stem completely stripped of the old coating, so all the drab is missing from the lower clamp. I haven't bothered to replate the steering stem itself, so I've got some plastic tape right down covering the bearing face, or what would be where the bearing mounts on. And so it's only the bit that's exposed is going to get plated, hopefully. And I'm running at 3.5 amps, which it's a difficult shape to calculate, but when I did the calculation it says around about 3 amps, and I'm just seeing a fine, I suppose you could call it curtain of bubbles coming up from the steering stem, so it looks like reaction taking place. Now we've just got to give it about 50 minutes to hopefully plate, and then we'll apply the drab. This is my sort of bodgy way of holding it in place. I can twist it round, and also I can pivot the angle of the steering stem so I can get good coverage. Ideally you'd do the whole thing, but I haven't got enough plating fluid to be able to do that. Anyway, we'll see how it goes, and fingers crossed it does a good job. So that's the plated finish. Comes up quite nicely actually. You could almost leave it like this. It's fine. It's fully protected now. But we're going to try and keep it with the original green I like up here. We're going to put it in a drab. So the first thing we do is just put it in this mild acid wash for 30 seconds. It's a difficult shake because there's lots of air pockets. So not long, it's just enough I think just to etch into the plating of friction without taking the plating off. Okay, so that's 30 seconds. And just wash off any excess, and then we just put it in the drab and put this in for 90 seconds. So you can see the plating, not the plating, passivation, and then one very gentle rinse just to knock off the excess. So that's the drab, and just for embellishing it, we're going to just put it in a water-based lacquer, and that's it. So we try and shake off any excess and let that air dry. It won't look as shiny when it dries out. It'll be quite a matte, like I say, drab finish, but has come up well. I was a bit worried that the underside here wouldn't plate, because it's a bit of an air pocket, and unless you're rotating the whole thing inside the bucket, that's it. So we'll leave it for at least 5 days in this case. I want it to dry off fully and not chip anything off, because there is some sort of hardening process for the passivation. So we'll leave that hang up to dry. So I'll just leave that hanging there so it's not touching anything for a good 5 days. We'll come back and have a look later. So this is a spring I've done. Because it's a spring, obviously it can be compressed. So what I've done is I've come up with a little jig. So that you can pull it apart and the spring's not compressed fully, to allow the plating to get into all the gaps between the coils of the spring. So that's been plating in there now. It's finished. We'll just now just give it a rinse and can hang up to dry. So this is the gadget. It's just a couple of holes drilled, recess holes in the end there, and just welded up some scrap steel, and then I use this to I use wood because obviously you don't want to be plating massive lumps of steel. It helps focus the plating process, otherwise I'd have to use a lot more amperage and you're just wasting your plating. So to release the tension, all I do is I just hook it on or locate it on the little jig in the 2 holes, and then wind it out to take the load off. That comes off because now it's super extended. I'll just get a bit of copper wire so I can hang it up to dry, like that, and then just slowly release the tension. And we're done. So overall I'm really quite happy with the way it's all turned out. You can see here these are what the parts look like originally before plating, and then they basically turn into this with no buffing, post buffing required. It comes out of the bath looking like this. Even like this stuff, which is, you know, really rusted, and admittedly it's pitted, you can sort of recover them quite well. You'll never get rid of the pitting when it's that bad, but that's obviously miles better than this thing. And like I say, you can't buy these sorts of things anymore. It's difficult to find. So they turn out quite well. Even these brackets, you know, the olive drab, comes up really nicely. This is how it was looking like. This sort of, it's lost everything and it's quite dull. And it comes back like that. So it's pretty amazing. And You know, even the spring was really rusted up. You can see there's a little bit of pitting on there. It's come up well. The axle bolt, and if you remember in the first part 1 video where I was DIYing, that's the same nut that was rusty on the inside after we plated. This time it's perfect. It's all the way through there. All the threads are done. There's a bit more, you know, these are your typical side stand bolts. You can do gold. You can do black as well, black finish. That's the steering stem top bolt, I suppose you call it. This was the one again in part 1 when the DIY one, it just gave it a really rough finish, but this comes out of the bath looking like that, and it's all down the plating inside there. These sorts of things. What else? And of course the big part, which was the steering stem clamp, has come up nicely. So yeah, overall very pleased. Now the drab is a bit tricky, and one thing I've changed now is when these things come out of the bath, you see me dipping them in the water bath just to wash them off, and it was a bit yellow. What I do now is I use a squeegee bottle of water and wash it with a squeegee bottle. That seems to be a lot better because you want the cleaning water to be as clean as possible. You don't want to be transferring any of the passivation from one thing to the other. So that's the only thing I've sort of changed a bit. And also make sure you get any drips off of your part. I'll show you what I mean, because it can go wrong, especially the drab. The drab is the trickiest one. Silver's really easy, and so is the gold. But yeah, the drab's the only tricky one. So these were some more test pieces. I was messing around with the olive drab because I wasn't getting like a consistent finish. Yeah, so it was interesting. You can see here you do get quite a variation. This is quite a nice glossy finish. But what can happen is, I think if you don't really give it a good shake, you get this a drip hanging on the end of the part, and that drip, I think for some reason just doesn't, either takes the plating off or something like that. But you really got to get the part quite dry and don't let it hang there with a big drip of fluid at the bottom. What else? And you can see here it's the same thing had happened, and this is why I'm using a squeegee bottle now. I tend to hold the thing up, spray the water so it just washes off completely, and then really give it a good shake, and then a very gentle dry with a air gun, not really low pressure, so just enough to dry it out 100% within about a minute, and that seems to work a lot better. So that's the only trick. I wouldn't say it's 100% you'll get it every time. Sometimes you do it and it will just not work because one part of the process you've messed up, or yeah. But generally, I think it's really good for the hobbyists if they're really got some parts that you just can't get off the shelf anymore. You give it a whirl. It's certainly worth it, and it's quite fun exercise to do. And once you got the process down, it's quite quick. I mean, most of these parts would take from start to finish probably, I'd say, 2 hours, and that's doing lots of parts all at once.